Edward P. Jones talks about the effort that a mother will go through to provide a better life for her child. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on a short story of interest. And today's short story is all about the first day of school for a young child and the relation that has to their mother. I am referring to The First Day by Edward P. Jones, which was written in 1992. For those who don't know, Edward P. Jones is a Black American writer who has been getting published since the early 90s. I think the short story collection in which The First Day shows up is one of their the first things that they got published. And they've since written a couple of books, but I don't think they've written anything recently. It seems like they've instead become a teacher. Of sorts, which is pretty good, and they teach, but I think people still write articles about Edward P. Jones for one of his books, The Known World, which won a lot of awards, but people have reflected on it later as well, and it seems to be a pretty solid book. So I might have to check that one out. But I don't know too much else about Edward P. Jones. There's not a lot of information out there. But without further ado, let's talk about The First Day. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The First Day focuses on an unnamed narrator, a young girl who wants to start her first day of school. And it's sort of written from the perspective of the future, where the narrator talks about, long before I learned to be embarrassed by my mother, here's a story that matters to me. That sort of highlights our relationship. And she's being taken to school by her mother. They have to walk a pretty long distance, but they eventually arrive at a church that's somewhat near their, or they arrive at a school that's somewhat near the church where the mother takes her daughter. But when they go inside, they're rejected by the school because one of the teachers says that they aren't in an area where the school services people, like there's districts and whatnot. But the mother is insistent, but ultimately they have to leave and go to a school that is more nearby, which doesn't seem to be as fancy. And so the mother tries to get the daughter enrolled. She has to request help because she can't read or write, and they're willing to help her. And then after they get the daughter signed up for classes, the narrator attends class. And as the story comes to a close, the narrator notes that the memory that sticks with them most, the thing that they could hear despite the fact that class was going on, was the mother's footsteps leading away from the classroom and the school. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a little bit we're talking about with this pretty short story. One of the main themes that Jones seems to be working with here is that of the motherly effort, the effort to provide a better future. And Jones shows that this mother will do the work. The mother will do quite a bit of effort, quite a bit of work to get the daughter into school. We see that at the beginning of the story where they take a long walk to get to this pretty solid school, and there's a battle through rejection. The mother doesn't simply want her daughter to go to any school. She wants her to go to this seemingly nice school, but that's not really possible. And so she takes her daughter to the second school, which there's that insistence that daughter does get an education, even if it isn't as first rate as she would like. But what's most interesting is that the mother is willing to admit that she's illiterate, which certainly isn't easy, especially in a society that prioritizes an education and whatnot. And so for you to admit that, you have to really want what comes after, which is being able to sign up the daughter for classes. And it also seems like The mother bribes one of the school administrators in order to making this happen. It says she just gave her like 50 cents, which I don't really know what exactly that means, but it does seem like it's a bribe there. So the mother is really working hard there. And Jones is really talking about the fact that parents strive to provide a better life for their children, which isn't like the first time anyone's really said this, but it's Jones is really using everything in this story to really highlight that one fact right there. And it's also interesting because the narrator is recalling this. They say long after they've learned to be embarrassed by their mother, they're recalling this story, which isn't really an embarrassing story. I think they're recalling, oh yes, my parents did do something that was vital and important for me. I understand their love, even if we can't relate on every single thing. So Jones does some pretty interesting writing about that. There also seems to be a tiny element of race and discrimination in this story. Maybe not as tiny as I would think. I think it's kind of there and very straightforward. The narrator's mom is trying to get her daughter to a good school, but faces obstacles. The first obstacle is being in the right neighborhood. It's a lot. It's a lot of work to get to that school. Maybe there's not as much transportation there, but it seems to be a decent school. But for some reason or another, the school doesn't really serve that neighborhood, which is a Jim Crow sort of thing, a relic of racism in the educational system, where we can't let the black people from that neighborhood come to our school. We're going to form our own district and only serve people in this specific neighborhood. It's a very fancy way to kind of redline. So you do see an element of that racial discrimination, which still seems to exist, even though the education system, we like to pretend that it's colorblind among many other things. But it's still a lot of work, even in their own neighborhood, to get for the mother to get the daughter into the school. One, she's illiterate, which is a product of the racist past and racist present too. A lot of black individuals weren't able to get into schools, or they had to go to their own schools, and those didn't have as many resources, and so you ended up with some illiteracy right there. And then I urge you to compare this to like your own experience. For me, it wasn't my parents didn't have to go through such great an effort to get me into school, and that's something for you to consider out there as well. Maybe write it down in the comments below. But as a white individual, I didn't have to go through this kind of experience, but I know many others in this world unfortunately do. And it's also important to note that Edward Jones was born in the 1950s. He would have probably been, like 10 years old in 1960, and he would have probably seen the amount of effort that his parents had to go through in order to get him into school. And even though Brown versus Board of Education was signed while he was still a child, it wouldn't have that kind of didn't have the effect until a little bit later, especially even though now the education system, we like to pretend that Brown versus Board of Education kind of fixed everything. There's still in many communities, especially in the South, where schools school systems have sort of discriminated or remain segregated, and nobody really nothing's really done about that because nobody really speaks out about it, or the government just kind of allows it to happen in the hopes that maybe people will forget about it and it'll go away. But Edward Jones's own history here is important to understand, because this might be something he felt and saw growing up, it's just important to understand the racism and the discrimination, segregation that still kind of exist in the United States. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The First Day by Edward P. Jones. A solid short story, maybe not one of the most fleshed out or anything like that, but certainly an interesting short story. I'll link to it in the comments below, or in the description below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let's have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. And other than that, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and first day of school travels. Farewell.